Welcome to the Employee Handbook and ND Labor Law Basics. This is a class from UNR Extension Small Business Education Program. We are very glad you are here in this Friday morning. And our agenda for today is going to be about definition. Not only definition, but we're going to talk about the details, the tools. Why do we need an employee handbook? Some policies and expectations. We're going to be talking about some mistakes, and our guest speaker is going to let us know some real life examples. Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Happy to be here today. My name is Kevin Johnson. As Juan said, I'm an attorney practicing here in Las Vegas, and I have a good amount of experience with issues that arise out of employee handbooks, primarily lawsuits that are filed either by employees or against employers. I've represented both. That really could have been avoided, or at least the position in the lawsuit could have been strengthened if they'd had a good handbook in place and good policies that were understood by everybody. So I'm happy to be here to hopefully help you avoid similar situations.
Definitely. Then we're going to jump into some Nevada labor law requirements and a good action plan, some tips and some tools that we have for you so you can implement these wonderful ideas. So before we begin with the presentation, we always want to let you know that there are many resources out there, especially from the Department of Business and Industry. You have to get familiar with the roadmap. They have lots of information, lots of good tools, many times for free, that you can use for the small business. So join this website. You can download all this wonderful information from here. This is the roadmap, a bigger image, so you can appreciate all the subjects and themes that you can search and browse about. So, employee handbook policies and expectations. Do I need an employee handbook? This is most small businesses start with this question. So, do you have an employees, or do you plan to have employees? So if the answer is yes, you definitely need an employee handbook. Okay, that's what it's for your employees. And we're going to talk about the importance and the benefits of having one. But let's also consider some statistics. A survey from Gusto basically says that only 26% of small businesses with fewer than 10 employees had employee handbooks. That's pretty low. Considering that the average litigation court statistics project found out that the median cost is about $88,000. So that's pretty significant amount of money. And definitely the rest, the other section of small businesses that do not have an employee handbook, they are at risk of having these kind of issues. From the Gusto survey, we can also see that compare the 26% of small businesses, 87% of the mid-sized businesses have employee handbooks. That tells you something, that as the business develops, they really appreciate and they can understand, learn about all the benefits of having an employee handbook. So it's not a matter of is it good or not. Yes, it is. And you just have to realize it sooner and apply it sooner, before you get bigger and bigger. This is some of the reasons why small business owners think that they don't need one. I don't have enough employees. This is totally doesn't make sense. I mean, if you have one employee, you need one. So the reason of I don't have enough employees is totally invalid. It takes too much time to create one. We have tools, we have apps, we have information to overcome that. It doesn't seem that important. I'm pretty sure Kevin doesn't agree with that. And we're going to tell you about some examples. And is it too expensive to create one? You can do it yourself. You can definitely do it yourself. It's going to take more time maybe, but you can outsource the creation of an employee handbook as well. Okay, and it's not very expensive. There are many apps now, and sometimes if you have services through a payroll company, sometimes they will let you use some tools or some apps or let you a hand in how to develop one. So let's talk about what is it for, what is an employee handbook. We can define it in many ways, but it is basically the main document of communication between a company and its employees. It is a document, it is written, sets the framework for expectations on both sides, companies and employees. Also outlines the company mission statement, policies, practices, and culture. So it is not about only compliance, it is also about your mission statement in the company, what is the purpose of your company, and the culture. It is not a contract, but it complements many legal documents. For example, the main contract, employee contract. Its role and benefits many times are overlooked. It is a legal protection, it is a compliance tool, it is a company's culture and image framework. It is a great communication tool that is written and it is specific. So the handbook should be as extensive as you need it to be. I have seen many employee books that are short. Some of them are 30 pages. So it is definitely something that it is unique to your business and you should think about it. There's no one magic document that will cover everything. The main employee handbook should include at least some of the following sections. And please note that I'm not numbering the sections because I don't want it to, I don't want you to see it as just these sections, because you can definitely use other sections or add other sections. The company's story and mission statement. It is not about, like I said, it's not about compliance. It doesn't have to be a boring document. Tell your company's origin and story. So this is an opportunity to invigorate your new employees with passion and excitement about your company. Talk about your company's accomplishments. If you have awards, you have comments from your clients, success stories, and the reason that everybody comes to work every day. Make sure to include how the employee is part of the process. This can be part of the onboarding process. So you can tell employees their particular function and how that is a big part of the final process, of the final mission that everybody's going forward. Describe the company culture. And this section helps you foster a sense of pride and belonging and sets the standard for employee relationships in general. What are the practices of some lunch with employees? What is the usual events or team activities that you have here in the company? Now let's talk a little bit about compliance, anti-discrimination and sexual harassment policies. This ensures that employees that it's a safe work environment with no tolerance for discrimination and harassment of any kind. We understand that it is a general sense that doing some things are wrong, but it must be written because that takes that gives that statement more power. Describe the methods of reporting complaints. This is very, very important because it's not only about, hey, I am against this and that. It is also about how do I report? How do I take care of that situation? And take opportunity to review applicable federal and state laws. This is a good opportunity to make a good summary and a reminder of what's going on at the federal level. Employee conduct standards. Examples include, some related to dress code, attendance, substance abuse, smoking areas, no smoking areas. It can be very, very specific, or sometimes you don't need to talk about some sections. But if you have a big building, if you have some people that are driving all the time, yes, definitely you should talk about employee conduct standards. If you have drivers, for example, there's a lot of rage in the highways. So definitely set up the rules and the framework. Employee relationships and fraternization. What is allowed in the office? What is not allowed? Some internet and cell phone usage and allowing websites. Sometimes we are working or taking the computers home. Is it okay that my son plays Minecraft in the company's computer? No. I mean, they can get hacked. They can get onto the wrong websites. Conflicts of interest. This sometimes happens when in situations for where your personal goals are no longer aligned with the responsibilities or with the tasks at hand. Okay. And sometimes it happens, we are in a very changing environment. Sometimes I do not agree with some of the company's policies, and there should be a system, there should be a process on how to take care of that. Employee benefits. This will include workers' compensation and COBRA insurance, for example. Do you offer life insurance, health insurance, supplemental insurance, retirement plans, or do you plan to do so? Educational opportunities, professional development. Are you willing to pay for some certifications, for some professional development courses? Is that part of your culture in educating your employees for advancements and things like that? It is very important that they feel that they have a long-term future in the company. Conflict resolution and disciplinary policies. This is very important because it outlines the procedures to communicate, document, and handle conflict resolutions. And conflicts can be internally and externally, outside the company. So this will provide you the framework and guidance for the employee on how to take or how to handle these things. Disciplinary policies are very important because usually hopefully they don't lead or they don't end up in firing someone, okay? But before firing someone, there should be a process. There should be something in writing that says, okay, if this occurs, you know what, you're fired, okay? And if there's proper documentation, we're not saying that you're not gonna have problems, but you're gonna be in a much better situation to handle that problem. Compensation and leave policies. This is something that is changing a lot with the pandemic, and it should be noted in the employee handbook and should be updated. Things, progress. Includes frequency of payments, payroll deductions, requests for sick leave, vacation, disability leave, carryovers, jury duty, many things. Procedures related to employee reimbursement, overtime, and promotions. Sometimes the employees need to stay overtime. What is the procedure? Are they getting compensated? If they are required to wear uniforms, if they are required to travel or gather or meet with clients? What is the employee reimbursement plan regarding those responsibilities? Safety and security. These will vary a lot depending on your industry, because you have some OSHA requirements, you have health district requirements. Now we have, pandemic requirements. So we have to be very clear about safety and security, but not only because we are told to, it's because it is part of your culture. It is part of keeping up a safe environment for the employees and for your clients. So this is another section where you can talk about how your company is different, that employees are working for a good company, for a company that cares about their employees. Emergency procedures and necessary equipment. This is regarding about, we're gonna give you computers, we're gonna give you safety equipment, we're gonna give you the tools that you need to complete your work. That can go from stand-up desks or chairs, desks, monitors, all things like that. Also about if you're required to stay over time, what is the procedures for entering and exiting the building? Do we have passcodes, alarm codes? If you have any problems, who to contact if it's overtime? What about shared spaces? Are you sharing spaces with other employees? A conference room, personal belongings? What happens if somebody, steals your cell phone while you're at the office? Things can happen. So it helps to plan for situations so you are well prepared. This is something, this section talks about non-disclosure and non-compete agreements. It's also driven by your industry, based on the nature of your company. These separate agreements might be applicable to protect your company, to protect your clients. And Kevin, you were telling me about a new update, right, regarding this?
Yeah, in the last legislative session, the legislature revisited this issue, and now in Nevada, it is against the law to have and try and enforce non-compete agreements against hourly employees. So if you pay your employees by the hour instead of versus paying them on commission or salaried, if you pay them by the hour and you have a non-compete and you try and enforce that non-compete, or if they bring an action of their own to try and declare that non-compete void, not only one, can the court not enforcement, but two, under that law, you can be responsible. You will be responsible for all the legal costs of that suit. And so it's something to keep in mind that if for whatever reason, you have a non-compete in place with your hourly employees because them leaving the business would cost you effort or whatever, you need to make sure that you revise your handbooks. Or that you pay your employees in a different way. Maybe you start paying them based on commission or salaried if having a non-compete is important to you. Because that just within the last few months became a very dangerous thing for employees to have. So
yes, and it definitely can create some advantages, but also disadvantages if depending on your industry. It's going to be very difficult if you have to move to another city to keep doing what you do. Technology policies. The use of personal cell phones or personal use of the company equipment like computers. Right now, everybody is getting hacked. Companies can use firewalls, companies can use a lot of IT protection, but if the employees do not follow procedure or are careless about it, things can happen. You can leave the opportunities for hackers to get in. So password management, data breach issues, how to report these data breaches. Safety of confidential information. If you handle credit cards, if you store somehow, somewhere, clients' confidential information. In the medical fields, in the construction, there's private and HIPAA laws that have to follow for the information security. And social media policy. Social media policy, it's kind of a little touchy section, but it should be addressed on the employee handbook. Many companies tell you, if you are wearing the uniform, if you're wearing our logo, you are not supposed to do this and that. You are not supposed to make posts that will definitely affect or can adversely affect the company, its employees, or the customers, or any other related parties. So it is very important to follow and establish procedures, because later on, employees might say, hey, I didn't know, nobody told me so. I thought that was a normal thing to do, but it's not. Don't assume that something that sounds logic to you is going to sound logic to your employees as well. That's why we have the employee handbook. So I just spent about 20 minutes talking about requirements, sections. I know these might sound overwhelming, lots of issues, lots of possible situations. But look ahead, look at the benefits that and protection that the employee handbook will provide. It will help you protect your business against employee lawsuits and claims. Wrongful termination, harassment, discrimination. Those issues are happening. Essential of creating transparency and consistency across your organization. You don't have to go to each employee and start repeating what you already said to the other employees. So it will create consistency across your organization and ensures compliance with federal and state laws. It is not required to have an employee handbook. So, but it will definitely, you will definitely need one when you need one. Okay, so to have one, it's a really smart move from your side as a business owner. It can efficiently compile most frequently asked questions, which will improve productivity. How do I handle this? How handle that? It is on the employee handbook. Please refer to the employee handbook. You can create sections, so you can make like a searchable document. They can find the answers real quick. It lowers turnover rates of employees, and that consequently reduces costs, because there are studies out there that if an employee understands in their first week the expectations, the procedures, it feels safe, it feels comfortable, it will stay for a longer period of time. It guides employees on how to report problems and request help with confidentiality. So it is sometimes hard for employees to ask, how do I report a sexual harassment situation? How do I report this problem? So they already have that information on hand, and they feel more confident about reporting issues, and they are not going to be exposed because they know the procedures, they know what to expect from the company if a situation like that arises. So, communication about procedures and expectations are crucial during changing times. This is section we're going to talk a little bit about, pandemic issues, things that are happening right now. It is important to have a written policy regarding vaccinations and the situation for the specifics of your business, because Right now, the state and the federal level, there are some contradicting things going on. So if you have local requirements, you have industry requirements, create awareness about that situation. You can, I mean, you can help me out on this, Kevin, but you cannot, force an employee to get vaccinated. I mean, you can incentivize them and things like that. But that's a very delicate situation where there's no court cases that can guide you or litigation that can use as a framework. So yes, we should address that situation, but we careful, right, Kevin?
Right. When you're dealing with anything that is highly political and emotional in nature, like everything with COVID is, you want to make sure that you have clear expectations that are consistently expressed and applied. So that way, some employee in the future that maybe you had to let go because they wouldn't get vaccinated, and maybe you work as a medical business and your employees have to be vaccinated, or whatever the case may be. You don't want that person to be able to turn around and use that as ammunition against you. So you want
Definitely.
to make sure that you can say, okay, well, this was the policy. It was expressed to everybody. We applied it to everybody. He wasn't the only. This person wasn't the only person we let go. This person let go as well, as well, as well. So that when that person turns out in the future, you're ready for it. You could say, no, this had nothing to do with you. This was the policy. Everybody was held to the same standard. You can take a lot of wind out of the sails if they try and come back at you later. For enforcing whatever policy you have in place regarding COVID or anything else as well.
Definitely, and consider some remote work procedures if it's possible. If it is doable within your the performance of your company. Just provide adequate resources, set up accountability and security procedures, so things and work can be done remotely. So let's talk about some mistakes. This is kind of the fun part for Kevin. So as an employer, you need to get familiar with several important federal laws that should be addressed on your in your employee handbook. About discrimination and harassment, minimum wages, workers' compensation, family and medical leave, usage of workforce complaints, conditions, wrongful termination of employment, things like that. I have provided you this link that will educate you about your responsibilities as an employer. There are many, many things to take care of, but just take a look. And many of these are not going to be applicable for your situation, but some will do. So you have to learn about that. Take into consideration this, the process to update your handbook of the company involves. The employee handbook will get updated. So it depends on you on how to automate that process. We have a lot of technology. We can use apps. We can use definitely searchable documents to automate the process and make sure that everybody knows about the updates. And do not use it only to address compliance, okay? Use it to describe the culture and goals of the company. You have to inspire employees to take action that are aligned with the company's mission. It doesn't have to be boring, It can definitely be a good document that describes your company's culture. Do not forget to include a disclaimer that is clear about the non-contractual nature of the handbook and that it's going to be updated as needed. An acknowledgement, include an acknowledgement page, a form that definitely the employee describes or states that it understands the employee handbook, agrees with what is said in the employee handbook. This is going to be the final step. It's not about just creating the document. It's about applying the document, practicing the document, and making sure the employees understand the document. Now, let's talk about some real examples from Kevin here. The employee handbook can discourage lawsuits and help you win. Explain. I mean, don't scare us that much, but
right. So the primary reason to have an employee handbook is to make sure that your business goes smoothly, your employees act the way they should, everything, so that you avoid problems. But problems are going to come eventually, and so a well-written and enforced employee handbook can help you, number one, avoid completely some lawsuits if you're lucky. But when those lawsuits inevitably come, they can set you up so that the facts are on your side and that you prevail in that lawsuit. So first and foremost, well, what a lot of people don't realize is there are attorneys out there looking for cases. It's not always, no, never, no.
I don't believe you, Kevin.
A lot of times, it's not what we think, where somebody is wronged and they go to attorney. Sometimes the attorney who speaks to somebody who they know or they come in contact with, and they say, oh, you might have a case there. And then that employee might gather other employees, and pretty soon you're getting sued by 5 or 6 or 10 of your employees over some issue that no one even thought existed a little bit before. And so you need to be prepared for that. I've had cases that came up like this, and I had one case that involved an incident that supposedly happened inside of a DJ booth. It involved inappropriate touching and sexual harassment, and that was the allegation, that these two employees were together. One of them was the supervisor of the other, and something happened in this DJ booth. Now, the employee handbook ended up saving the day here, because in this employee handbook, it had spelled out exactly what you were to do as an employee if you had any issue at all. If you felt someone was sexually harassing you, if somebody touched you inappropriately, said, you speak to this person, you speak to your supervisor about it immediately. If your supervisor is part of the problem, you speak to, you call this number, this outside number, you report it immediately so that we can take care of this issue. We need to know about it. And when you have lawsuits like this, they're going to sue the person involved, the other employee, but they're also going to sue you as the employer. They're going to try and get that to you because you're the person that has the money or the insurance coverage or whatever it may be. And so the way that they do that is they say, okay, you knew about what was going on, or you should have known about what was going on, and you didn't do anything to stop it. That's how they make you liable as an employer. And so the opposite of that is how you defend yourself. You show, look, I didn't know about this, and so I couldn't do anything about it. And that's what happened in this case. The employee had not followed what was written in the employee handbook, what they had been trained to do. She never told them, and she didn't make a report, and she didn't tell anybody, and so the employer couldn't do anything about it. And so when we worked through the whole case, eventually that was one of the main factors that the court pointed to and said, look, this employer couldn't have done anything about this situation, even if they wanted to, because the employee did not follow the employer's policies. They didn't call it in, they didn't report it, so the employer couldn't do anything about it. And so in that situation, having an employee handbook that spelled out exactly what you're supposed to do by making sure the employees had it and understood it saved the day, really. Because without that, it would have been a he said, she said thing, and it could have easily gone against them if a jury or a judge believed the employee. I had another case that involved, it was kind of like I described. You had a group of employees that got together and all of a sudden alleged against their employer that they had not been paid for promotional work that they did, outside of their normal shifts, and that they had to buy their own uniforms. And we have a law here in Nevada that says you have to, if you require employees to wear something specific, you have to provide it for them or give them money to buy it. And they claimed it had never been a problem before, but all of a sudden we got this lawsuit alleging these things. And in this case, the employer did not have clearly defined policies regarding these things. It was the practice, of course. The employer told me, we always start and end any promotional work we do. We always start and end at the club. So you clock in, we do whatever we're going to do, and then you clock out. I mean, we pay people for everything they do. Same thing with uniforms, but it wasn't written down anywhere, and it wasn't something that was clearly communicated to everybody and clearly enforced. And so that suit was more complicated. It was harder to establish that this was in fact the policy of the business, that everyone has to clock in anytime they're doing anything for the business, and everyone has to clock out when they're done, and everyone, and the business pays for your uniforms. That was harder to establish than it should have been. And the last point that we often see in lawsuits is firing people. We're going to talk about this a little more when we get into the labor law section, but oftentimes you have to fire problematic employees, and it's not uncommon for an employee to turn around and claim and try and create trouble for you as an employer. You fired them after they missed their 5th shift in a month, but then and then all of a sudden, a year later, you get a lawsuit saying that you fired them because of their race or their religion or their sexual orientation or their gender or whatever the case may be, and that you retaliated against them for complaining about the treatment. And that can be a big problem. Whereas if you have it spelled out in your employee handbook that this is what gets you fired, if you miss a shift without giving notice, without finding a substitute, that's your first warning. If it happens again, you're fired, or whatever the case may be in your business. And if you have that policy clearly written out, then when events like this happen, you can enforce that policy. And more importantly, you can say, look, this is our policy with everybody. We fired this person when they missed. We fired this person when they fell short of this standard. And so it becomes more difficult for that employee to make up a reason for their firing and to turn it against you. And so these are just a couple of ways in which an employee handbook can really help you avoid lawsuits, or, if they come, be prepared to handle them and to prevail.
Yeah, definitely. These are great examples, and things happen. And like, yes, we try to encourage small businesses to take some action towards this, or sometimes in my practice, in the tax practice, and it's difficult when we see the bad examples, happen, that it can be prevented, definitely. So let's talk about more specifics about Nevada labor law requirements. Like in the federal level, there are many requirements, and also varies about your industry. But this is a wonderful website. I think the state does a wonderful job in communicating and providing good information, relevant information. So the Office of the Labor Commissioner, this is their website. And in their main page, you're going to find, for example, the status and regulations, minimum wage and overtime bulletins. This is updates. These are very simple to understand rules that are updated and change. We have the employers posting, required postings. This is very this is very frequent, right, Kevin? I mean, just a single poster, just not posting that single poster can get you in trouble. It's something very basic, but it can definitely get you in hot waters. And an example of the news that they have, for example, this was posted on April 1st in 2021, and it was talking about the minimum wage, and explaining very in detail, who needs to pay $8.75, who needs to pay $9.75, when this is going to change. So you can definitely prepare yourself and prepare your budget for these changes for your small business. And here we have summarized some of the posters, and these posters, I have read these posters many times, and I really encourage you to read the posters, because this is information that you are required to provide to your employees. Don't you think it is important that you as an employer knows about these requirements? At least read it once. I mean, this is public information. So it's good to know what your employee already knows and what you are telling them they should know. So these are the main posters. The AB 190, that is regarding sick leave. The 307 is about job training and employment programs. The 209 is how the employee use paid leave. And the CR1 is the requirement to provide personal protective supplies to employees. You know, this states what you are supposed to provide to your employees during these times of pandemic. The first one, rules to be observed by employers in 2021. This is an excellent summary and of many of rules about hiring, termination, compensation, overtime, and termination. This is practically what you should include on your employee handbook, okay? You can definitely refer to these laws. And just to go back, you know, all of those posters, you can find and you can download a copy over here. Employer postings, required postings on this website, okay? Let's talk about workers' compensation insurance. Kevin, is this like a hot issue, workers' comp? Do you really need workers' comp?
There are attorneys who only work involving workers' comp issues and appealing them and coming, I don't personally have a lot of experience in that area, but yeah, it's a big thing.
It's a big issue.
Its
And
own practice area.
do not assume that everybody's going to be an independent contractor, that you don't have employees, therefore you don't have to have workers' compensation insurance. That is a wrong approach, and the state is trying to find employers like that. So all employers need coverage unless excluded by statute. And if you think you are one of those exceptions, this website is for you. This is the industrial relationships website. And over here, we have these 4 documents: employer coverage requirements, employer brochure. It's gonna tell you about exemptions. And I'm telling you, many are not applicable. A lot of employees do not apply to those exemptions, especially if they are in the construction industry. Employer frequently asked questions, and again, mandatory posting requirements. So these 2 websites are gonna be your source of information for local Nevada laws. We can go over all the laws, but many are not applicable in just industry. So we wanna provide you the source where you can find all the information needed. So, Kevin, we have been told that we live in a state that is, at will employment. It's kind of the Wild West. Anything goes. Everybody can leave and everybody can get fired. What's the real definition?
So, in many cases, that's true. You can fire somebody without giving them a reason. You can fire them whenever you want to, but there are some exceptions to that, of course. So first off, many employees may have a contract in place that outlines what a person can be fired for. This could be a contract for a union. This could be a contract just with the employee. You see this a lot in situations where you're hiring somebody on a project basis. So that's the first thing. Obviously, being an at-will state does not give you cover to breach any agreements that you may have. What is more common and more problematic is you obviously cannot fire anyone because of their race or gender, religion, national origin, disability status, because they're pregnant, and you think they're going to need a lot of time off and you don't want to, keep them on because their family member is sick. I mean, there are some laws that set up specific categories of persons, protected classes, we call them, and you cannot fire someone for being part of that class. Now, there are very few people in society today that do this maliciously, that fire, you know, that might fire someone who's Catholic because they don't like, just because they're Catholic, or who's a man or a woman just because they're a man or woman. That doesn't happen a lot anymore, which is a good thing. But what we do see often is cases where somebody feels that management's conduct towards them and their eventual firing had to do with the fact that they belong to one of these classes. So, for instance, somebody who is Jewish, who observed the Sabbath on Saturday, you know, let's say they keep turning down Saturday shifts. And let's say maybe their manager says to them one day, it'd be really nice if you could work Saturdays. And they explain, well, I just can't do that. I don't believe in that. It's against my religion. You move on. Eventually, let's say you let that person go because, for whatever reason, you claim you believe they were stealing from you. They missed their shifts. You just don't have the work for them. Whatever reason, you let them go. Then they come back and say, okay, I was fired because I was Jewish and I wouldn't work on Saturdays. So you fired me because of my religion. That's kind of what it looks like most commonly in today. Very rarely do you see just outright discrimination. It's things like that. And you as an employer often feel, like that had nothing to do with it, that you fired them because of this reason or that reason or this reason.
Mhm.
And
And
so,
probably you already have documentation about those incidents happening, and it is detailed on your employee handbook about, warnings and
exactly.
procedures and how to document the incidents.
Right. And that's why the employee handbook is one of the reasons why it's so important, is because if that happens, if they come back with saying that it was because they were part of a protected class, then you can say, well, no, we treated you the same as every other employee. You got the same warnings. Here's the write-ups. Here's why we let you go. Um, Kind of tied into that issue is, especially when you're talking about gender issues and sexual harassment, is you often see claims of retaliation. So an employee comes to you and says, hey, this person, the supervisor, or my co-employee, or whoever, is making inappropriate comments all the time. They touched me, whatever the case may be. And let's say they do that, and let's say you handle it as an employee. You move that person to a different shift, you fire the other person, whatever the case may be. And then eventually you let that person go. Oftentimes you see that person come back and say, not only did this happen to me at work, so not only did they allow this hostile environment to happen, they discriminated against me because I was a man or woman or whatever, but they also fired me because I made this report to management that this was going on, and that was, a problem for them. They didn't take it seriously. They thought I was just complaining, so they fired me. And so you can't fire someone for speaking out about issues at work. And so this is another reason why it's so important to have policies in place, so that when they make that claim that they were fired just for speaking out, you can say, no, you were fired for breaching these policies. Here's the policy handbook. Here's the records, what happened. Um, and so, number one, you need to be aware of what these protected classes are, race, gender, religion, so that you don't accidentally uh, discriminate against somebody because of one of these things. Um, and you also need to have these policies clear so that they can't turn around and accuse you of discriminating or firing them because of one of these protected classes or because they were speaking out about it.
Yes, and definitely it is important to have the procedures, but we're going to talk about some action plan tips here because we want you to put all this information into action. First, make a handbook that fits your needs, no less, no more. Um, this might be like very logic idea, but you have to understand your culture, what is your mission statement of your company, and how you're going to integrate your employees in that mission statement. So that's what the employee handbook should be all about. You know, you don't have employees yet, consider yourself as an employee. This is a perfect timing to get this done before you have to follow it. Because once you have employees, basically you have to abide by the employee handbook as well. So if you're the only one, you have to only talk to yourself. That's a good situation right now. Packaging and presentation. Do not envision your employee handbook as a boring document. You can use photos, you can use videos, you can use your own personal your company language. What is part of your company, how do you treat your clients, how that should be reflected on your employee handbook. Some companies use videos and dynamic presentations. Um, uh, things Many of these topics are uncomfortable for many people or are a little bit touchy. So you can make videos to ease the transition of the information. You can do presentations, interactive presentations, and use and follow your employee handbook. Like Kevin said here, do not deviate. Do not deviate from what you have already accepted as your employee handbook, because it will only create legal exposure. If you don't agree with it, update it. That's what we that's what we imply when we say that make your handbook that fits your needs, your culture, your mission statement, how you want to be treated and how do you want employees to treat your own employees internally. Okay. Just some useful websites. The Hartford, it's an insurance company, but I seen and I have a look at some articles. This is a great article about in explaining again some of these sections and provides you a list so you can brainstorm what you need, what you want to include in your employee handbook here. It will give you more ideas. It will touch on some different subjects about technology, social media, policies, and things like that. Then the 10 best employee handbook examples for 2021. This is when you start using technology like apps to develop your employee handbook examples. And it's gonna give examples about big companies like Netflix, Zappos, how they implement their own culture in the employee handbooks. They are really good examples to make you think, to be more creative, and so you don't end up with a boring document that even you don't want to read it. And also, again, the links for the Department of Labor, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the Government Services and Information website. These are websites that are full of information, but you just have to pick and choose on what fits your particular company. This is the end of the presentation. We are very glad that you're here. If you have some questions, comments, some feedback, hopefully this class comes in the right time so you can develop your employee handbook and you can avoid different situations in the future. So yes, I will. Okay, we have some questions now. Kevin says, okay, should an employee handbook include processes and procedures, or is that more like a training manual? It is for processes and procedures. A training manual is a separate document. It is something that that is listed on your employee handbook. Yes, we're going to provide training manuals. For example, how to connect the printer, how to connect to the server, how to save documents. That's more regarding processes, internal processes for how to conduct regular operations. In lieu of federal postings physically on the office walls, is it permitted to have them in a binder or have each employee sign that they have been provided and have access to this information? The federal postings, if you're talking about the posters, the state ones specifically, you have to post the posters. That's my understanding as well, Kevin, because there are specifications about the font that has to be used at the state level. So there are parameters on how that information should be displayed. Regarding the federal postings, do we have any federal posters? I don't think so.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but I don't. The ones that I have seen are regarding Nevada, and they have specifications on the size of the letters and how and where to display those. So you're gonna need a wall for that.
If
Go
I
ahead.
could say one thing about the first question here, the handbook should include your process and procedures, but to having training sessions on both the trainings that your employees actually need to do their jobs, but also on the handbook, is just more evidence that can be on your side if you ever have an issue. So if you have an employee handbook that everyone gets and everyone signs that they got it and understand it, that's great. If you have sessions where you go over important parts of that, where you talk about what to do if you believe you're being harassed or discriminated against or whatever, that's even better, because then when they come back, if they come back and try and sue you for something, then you can say, well, look, not only do we have the handbook, here's your copy that you signed and said that you understood, but we did this training on this date that you were at and that you signed that you attended, and we did this training and this training. Just more support you can have if you ever need it. So while it does include policies and procedures, trainings are important to have as well. And then as far as the third question with the workers' comp insurance, I would just talk to your broker. There are people who sell that, and I would say, they would be able to guide you. But also, I mean, it usually doesn't hurt to have insurance of any kind that's applicable to your business. And so if you're ever, at a fork and they tell you you can have this, you don't need it, but you can, and you can afford it, it's not ever a bad idea, really, in my opinion, to have extra insurance.
And also the state, the workers' compensation department, the website that I talk about, they are very helpful. They are very approachable. So you can send them an email and tell them, okay, this is the situations, and they will provide you with a recommendation from the state perspective. Yes, there are levels of I'm required to, but like Kevin mentioned, you can go above that and definitely get more insurance on top of your minimum requirements. But the state provides great information. If you have any questions, we can try to guide you through the proper channels. But our state at the workers' compensation, we had some previous town hall presentations about workers' comp, and they are very helpful, very approachable in in answering questions and making sure this situation might be a little bit different. Do I do this, or I don't need to? And the comment, I don't know if there's a question here, but the local radiology provider required their employee to have vaccinations, and one employee had a neurological adverse event and is now suing. Hopefully it's not with you, but
Well, and I can comment on this just real quick. People can sue for whatever reason they want to sue. However, I can foresee a few issues with that particular lawsuit. Number one, there's the problem with causation. So whatever adverse event happened has to do with the vaccine. And the employer didn't make the vaccine. The employer didn't give them the vaccine. And there's nothing in statute that says you can't require your employees to get the vaccine. And so, again, people can sue for anything they want, and even if it is a frivolous case, it can be a huge expense. Even if there's no basis for it, but just be aware that whenever you hear of somebody saying, "Oh, well, they sued for this," doesn't mean that they have grounds for doing it. They may have ulterior motives for doing it, and you often don't have all the facts. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents about
that's
about those things.
preparedness is one of the key things. So I think the employee handbook will be the first step towards that line of defense. I'm pretty sure, Kevin, if you find an employee in trouble and the employer doesn't have an employee handbook, things might be easier that way, depending on the situation. So thank you for your questions. Thank you for your comments. Let's put this information into practice, and please visit us, our website, join us on the next classes. Thank you for your participation. Kevin, thank you very much for all your knowledge and examples.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Everybody, have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.